Why hello there friends, it's Emma here, the Bookish Princess. Welcome to my 1000th video on YouTube. I was looking at the numbers, and this is upload number 1000, which is pretty crazy. It seems appropriate that it is the last reading vlog of the year. I have been decking out my space. I already did a little decoration tour video, but it's very festive and cozy. The perfect atmosphere to get some reading done. In last month's reading vlog, I mentioned I was feeling a little overwhelmed because there were a lot of books I wanted to get through before the end of the year, and I felt like I was lagging behind. But over Thanksgiving, I did have a chance to catch up, do a whole bunch of reading, so I did finish Rilla of Ingleside. This was the last of the Anne of Green Gables sequels that I wanted to read. I bought these beautiful Virago modern classics and I wanted to make sure I broke them all in. I think I read 3 or 4 of the sequels this year. This is the last one. Anne's youngest daughter, Rilla, is growing up and becoming a young woman. She's, I think, 15 or 16 when we first meet her. I did know ahead of time that this was going to be set during World War I, so it's going to be more sober, and it really made you feel like you were going through day by day the life of a young girl in Canada during World War I. Her brothers have gone off to war. You know, they're following the news battle by battle. You really get a play-by-play of them just anxiously waiting how their community reacted to the war, and how Rilla really grows up and becomes more responsible, runs the Junior Red Cross. She ends up adopting a war baby whose mother has died and whose father is away at the front, and it's so sweet to hear how she takes care of him. The irrepressible Susan is, of course, in evidence. She's one of my favorite characters. She's like the cook and housekeeper and just sort of right-hand man that keeps Ingleside afloat. There was one quote about how Susan went out to like dig potatoes or do something in the garden with the same courage and like grit that the young men at the front were showing. Rilla also helps to organize a war wedding, which is really fun. But there are, of course, very sad and sober moments. This was such a poignant description. The fierce flame of agony had burned itself out, and the gray dust of its ashes was over all the world. Rilla found it was possible to go on with existence, since existence had still to be reckoned with. There was work to be done, for Susan could not do all. For her mother's sake, she had to put on calmness and endurance as a garment in the day. But night after night, she lay in her bed, weeping the bitter, rebellious tears of youth, until at last tears were all wept out, and the little patient ache that was to be in her heart until she died took their place. She clung to Miss Oliver, who knew what to say and what not to say. So few people did. Kind, well-meaning callers and comforters gave Rilla some terrible moments. Just a really beautiful portrait of life during World War I, and a beautiful portrait of Rilla growing up through it. I did also finish Purgatorio. I've been reading Dante's Divine Comedy this year, rereading it, but for the first time reading Dorothy Sayers' translation. Dorothy Sayers wrote the Lord Peter Mysteries. I feel like if you've watched my past reading vlogs, you've already heard me say that, but like if you haven't, if you happen to be tuning in for the first time, maybe you don't know whose Dante translation it is, so I'm just trying to fill you in, you know? Anyway, I love Dorothy Sayers, love reading her Dante translation, and love coming back to Dante. I mentioned when I was reading Inferno that I was looking forward to Purgatorio because, like, you know, everyone's rightly oriented in Purgatorio. Everyone's going up the mountain, whereas everyone down in Inferno is just wrongly oriented. They're just holding on to their selfish passions. People associate like hell and the devil with like flames, but Dante actually in the bottom level of hell makes it cold as ice. Like there's no heat, there's no fire. It's such a vivid image, and Dorothy Sayers kind of points that out. In Purgatory, we do have some fire, kind of a purifying fire, and at first Dante is afraid of it, but as they get up to the top of the mountain, there's like a wall of fire that you have to go through to make it up, because of course next comes Paradiso. I thought it was really neat how at the very top of Mount Purgatory is the Garden of Eden. So it's like the human journey from Eden to paradise was meant to be real short and sweet, but of course after the fall, it's like you gotta go all the way up Mount Purgatory. Just as there were 7 circles of hell, there are 7 circles, cornices, I think they have a different name. The 7 sins that different people are purifying themselves of. Zeal to be moving goads us so that stay we cannot, if our duty seem at first too like discourtesy. Forgive us, pray. So yes, Dante does stop to chat with some people on each cornice. On this level, the souls are purging themselves from sloth. And I thought it was really interesting. Dorothy Sayers gives such great notes that really, it's like talking to a friend who really knows the subject as you're reading, who's, like explaining it and also giving her take. The sin, which in English is commonly called sloth, and in Latin, accidia, or more correctly, acedia, Dorothy Sayers is so smart, is insidious and assumes such protean shapes that it is rather difficult to define. It is not merely idleness of mind and laziness of body. It is that whole poisoning of the will, which, beginning with indifference and an attitude of "I couldn't care less," extends to the deliberate refusal of joy and culminates in morbid introspection and despair. One form of it, which appeals very strongly to some modern minds, is that acquiescence in evil and error which readily disguises itself as tolerance. Another is that refusal to be moved by the contemplation of the good and beautiful, which is known as disillusionment, and sometimes as knowledge of the world. Yet another is that withdrawal into an ivory tower of isolation, which is the peculiar temptation of the artist and the contemplative, and is popularly called escapism. The penance assigned to it takes the form of the practice of the opposite virtue, an active zeal. Note that on this cornice alone, no verbal prayer is provided for the penitents. For them, to labor is to pray. So yes, I'm very excited to hop into Paradiso next. I'd kind of like to finish up the Divine Comedy by the end of the year. It would be nice to have kind of read all of it or most of it in 2021. So we'll see how quickly I move through the cantos. It is actually fairly quick reading, I would say. Sometimes with the classics, so it's Dante, the Divine Comedy, Inferno, like it sounds a little intimidating, but Dante has a really readable, relatable voice. He, of course, was one of the first authors to write in his native language rather than in Latin. He wrote in Italian. Very excited to get up into Paradise at last. And then last but not least, I am happy to report that I have caught up in my Shakespeare reading. I'd fallen behind. The 3 Henry VI plays were the last 3 on my list that I wanted to get through in my Shakespeare month project throughout 2021. And I just sat through, powered through Henry VI Part 1 and Henry VI Part 2. So now I should be able to finish up Henry VI Part 3 throughout December. These plays are very dramatic. They are leading us up to the War of the Roses. And we actually see a scene in a garden where like the 2 factions pick a white rose and pick a red rose, and like they say, my followers are going to wear the red rose, my followers are going to wear the white. It's the houses of York and Lancaster, and the bone of contention really goes back to King Richard III. Another of the history plays, Richard III is deposed by Henry IV. Henry V was, of course, a very charismatic ruler. His son Henry VI ascended the throne very young. In fact, the first Henry VI is mostly the followers of Henry V trying to hold on to all of his conquests from war and not succeeding. And then in the Henry VI Part 2, we see how, unfortunately, Henry VI is just not cut out to be a ruler. All of his good advisors have been cut out and discredited by his scheming advisors. It reminds me a little bit of Yangtze Palace, as a Chinese period drama that I really enjoyed. So good. It's set in the royal court in China in, when would that be? 1700s, 1800s? I can't remember the year exactly. Anyway, there's so much scheming and so many different factions, and like one person will like say, oh, may I be struck by lightning if I'm lying, and like they're lying. The advisors of King Henry VI are kind of similar. They're like, oh, I promise you, he's the bad one, when it's like they're the bad one. One more Henry VI to get through. Yes, I feel sort of re-energized by my Thanksgiving reading and hoping I will make some good progress throughout December. fresh cup of tea here and a pile of books, and I thought I would tell you guys about my progress in my reading list so far, trying to get through some things before the end of the year. One of the books on my list has been the Analects of Confucius. So I reread Walden by Thoreau earlier this year, and that led me to other great books because he references so many great authors. I reread the Bhagavad Gita, and I also wanted to pick up Confucius again. This is a collection basically of sayings, so there's not really an overarching narrative, but they're all really thought-provoking. He's looking at how to follow in the way of goodness, how to be a true gentleman. A gentleman takes as much trouble to discover what is right as lesser men take to discover what will pay. A gentleman in his dealings with the world has neither enmities nor affections, but wherever he sees right, he ranges himself beside it. There was one saying where he points out that if you think about a thing twice, that's good. But if you think a third time, then self-deception is entering into the picture and you're just going to get confused. So think twice, not thrice, was the general lesson. Is goodness indeed so far away? If we really wanted goodness, we should find that it was at our very side. A divine sage I cannot hope ever to meet. The most I can hope for is to meet a true gentleman. The master said, a faultless man I cannot hope ever to meet. The most I can hope for is to meet a man of fixed principles. Yet where all around I see nothing pretending to be something, emptiness pretending to be fullness, penury pretending to be affluence, even a man of fixed principles will be none too easy to find. I think I just have a couple more books to go, but I'm really enjoying this. Another book that was on my list was The House of Mirth. So this is from The Three Novels of New York by Edith Wharton. I've had this edition for a while, and I have read The Custom of the Country. Didn't really care for it. I have read The Age of Innocence. Disliked that less, but still not a huge fan. Edith Wharton's narrative sort of plots just make me feel a little dead inside, and I think they're supposed to because they're describing New York society, and it is all very shallow and superficial. And like she talks about how it's shallow and superficial, but I just don't feel like I walk away having learned anything. Her writing is incredibly beautiful. So The House of Mirth was the only one that I hadn't read, and I got about 7 chapters in. There were some great passages, some beautiful descriptions. Her writing is very incisive. It's like she sees some like quirk of language or some scene in life that like everyone has experienced, and she like cuts it out with scissors and like presents it to you as you've never really looked at it before. I liked this one scene. Lily is the main character, and she's talking to Mr. Gryce and asking him about his hobby, Americana. It was the one subject which enabled him to forget himself, or allowed him rather to remember himself without constraint, because he was at home in it. I like that saying, to forget yourself. The real meaning of it is kind of the opposite. It means that you can forget restraint and you can instead really dive into it and like remember everything you love about a subject you're passionate about. I do always love a good tea description or tea scene in a book, and there is a good one here on the railway train. When the tea came, he watched her in silent fascination while her hands flitted above the tray, looking miraculously fine and slender in contrast to the coarse china and lumpy bread. It seemed wonderful to him that anyone should perform with such careless ease the difficult task of making tea in public in a lurching train. He would never have dared to order it for himself, lest he attract the notice of fellow passengers. But secure in the shelter of her conspicuousness, what a fun little description. He sipped the inky draught with a delicious sense of exhilaration. Lily, with the flavor of Selden's caravan tea on her lips, had no great fancy to drown it in the railway brew, which seemed such nectar to her companion. But rightly judging that one of the charms of tea is the fact of drinking it together, that's great, she proceeded to give the last touch to Mr. Gryce's enjoyment by smiling at him across her lifted cup. So in the first 7 chapters, we meet Lily, we meet Mr. Gryce, who's a very rich young man. We also meet Selden, who is not a very rich young man, but he's kind of like independent. He's a little bit apart from society. Lily has been around society for quite a long time. She's been trying to catch a rich husband. Her family was wealthy when she was growing up, but they lost all their money, and for her to be able to live in this glittering world, she knows she's going to have to marry money. So she wants to catch Mr. Gryce, but she's also really fascinated by Selden. He threw a new light on her surroundings. He had preserved a certain social detachment, a happy air of viewing the show objectively, of having points of contact outside the great gilt cage in which they were all huddled for the mob to gape at. Later, Lily and Selden have a conversation about precisely this, and it's so fascinating. My idea of success, he said, is personal freedom. Freedom? Freedom from worries? From everything, from money, from poverty, from ease and anxiety, from all the material accidents. To keep a kind of republic of the spirit. That's what I call success. What a great definition. Lily, however, doesn't seem quite sold on the republic of the self. She loves the comfort and all the glitter in the gilded cage. Later in that same conversation, Selden also says, the queer thing about society is that the people who regard it as an end are those who are in it, and not the critics on the fence. It's just the other way with most shows. The audience may be under the illusion, but the actors know that real life is on the other side of the footlights. The people who take society as an escape from work are putting it to its proper use, but when it becomes the thing worked for, it distorts all the relations of life. Selden raised himself on his elbow. Good heavens, he went on, I don't underrate the decorative side of life. It seems to me the sense of splendor has justified itself by what it has produced. The worst of it is that so much human nature is used up in the process. If we're all the raw stuff of the cosmic effects, one would rather be the fire that tempers a sword than the fish that dyes a purple cloak. And a society like ours wastes such good material in producing its little patch of purple. As I was getting to the end of this conversation, I just suddenly had a bad, sinking feeling about where the story was going, because this is Edith Wharton. You know, I've been through the Age of Innocence and Custom of the Country, and I was like, I'm not sure. I can't see anything really good happening in Lily's future. Like earlier in the story, I think it's a cousin of Selden's is mentioned just in passing, and she has a shabby little flat and works a job and supports herself. She's not out looking for a rich husband. She's not, you know, at the balls and participating in society. And honestly, I would rather read a book about her than about Lily. So I did go ahead and spoil it for myself. I never mind spoilers. I really appreciate them because there are so many wonderful books to read out there and so little time that, you know, there's no point in wasting time with a book that isn't going to, like, sort of give you something in return. You might as well wait, maybe even try it again a couple years later and, like, it'll speak to you then. But if you're not feeling it, I'm very much in favor of DNFing, and this is going to be a DNF. So spoiler warning, total spoilers for House of Mirth coming at you. You've been warned. Basically, Lily just goes from disaster to disaster to disaster. She does not manage to hook a rich man. She's like scrambling, desperate to hold onto her position in society and just kind of keeps sinking lower and lower. Selden appears briefly now and then, but mostly she ends up contracting these debts to these powerful and awful people. And it ends with her becoming addicted to drugs, finally gets the money to repay her debts, but then dies of an overdose, presumably of suicide. Just don't feel like that's a plot I need to put myself through. I'm well aware that life is full of disasters. It's like when I read to give myself reasons to push through the disasters, you know, to keep on going. Edith Wharton and I, once again, not really working out. My mom has read the letters of Edith Wharton and really loved them, and apparently Edith Wharton was a really cool person, not you know, like Lily, like she really did a lot of good in the world and had a lot of hopefulness, which you really don't see at all in her literary works. I have picked up the letters briefly, but see, maybe I just need to accept the fact that maybe nonfiction, even Edith Wharton and I could get along, but fiction, it's just never gonna happen. I would rather dive into the world of Dune. I need to pick this up again. I made a little bit of progress last month. I'm trying to read through all the sequels of Dune. I did watch the new movie adaptation. I thought it was quite good. I did more of a full review in my last month's reading vlog. It's just so neat that the story, you know, is so sweeping that it like spans the galaxy and spans ages upon ages, thousands and thousands of years. I do think the original Dune is the best. The sequels are more just, if you enjoyed the original, it's fun to spend more time in this world. I would read you guys a few quick things out of this Christmas poems book. It's really fun. It has all sorts of lyrics of all sorts of popular Christmas songs and carols, which is always so beautiful. I think, was it last year or the year before, I posted a little Christmas hymn of "It Came Upon a Midnight Clear," because the words are just so beautiful when you take the time to stop and listen to them. For lo, the days are hastening on by prophets seen of old, when with the ever-circling years shall come the time foretold. When peace shall over all the earth its ancient splendors fling, and all the world give back the song which now the angels sing. Just so many beautiful hymns this time of year. And it's so neat to see the Christmas poems: Kipling, Longfellow, Sir Walter Scott, Robert Louis Stevenson, Langston Hughes, Yeats, T.S. Eliot, Dorothy Parker. I thought her poem was so sweet. "It's queer," she said, "I see the light as plain as I beheld it then, all silver-like and calm and bright. We've not had stars like that again. And she was such a gentle thing to birth a baby in the cold. The barn was dark and frightening. This new one's better than the old. I mind my eyes were full of tears, for I was young and quick distressed. But she was less than me in years that held a son against her breast. I never saw a sweeter child, the little one, the darling one. I mind I told her when he smiled, you'd know he was his mother's son. It's queer that I should see them so. The time they came to Bethlehem was more than 30 years ago. I've prayed that all is well with them." Langston Hughes tells the story from a shepherd's perspective. "Look there at the star. I among the least will arise and take a journey to the east. But what shall I bring as a present for the king? What shall I bring to the manger? I will bring a song that I will sing, a song for the king in the manger. Watch out for my flocks. Do not let them stray. I am going on a journey far, far away. What shall I bring as a present for the child? What shall I bring to the manger? I will bring a lamb, gentle, meek, and mild, a lamb for the child in the manger. I'm just a shepherd boy, very poor I am, but I know there is a king in Bethlehem. What shall I bring? What shall I bring as a present just for him? What shall I bring to the manger? I will bring my heart and give my heart to him. I will bring my heart to the manger." Since I'm planning to post this vlog on Christmas Eve, here's one for Christmas Eve. "Christmas hath a darkness, brighter than the blazing noon. Christmas hath a chillness, warmer than the heat of June. Christmas hath a beauty, lovelier than the world can show. For Christmas bringeth Jesus, brought for us so low. Earth, strike up your music, birds that sing and bells that ring. Heaven hath answering music, for all angels soon to sing. Earth, put on your whitest bridal robe of spotless snow, for Christmas bringeth Jesus, brought for us so low." I'm sure I will be taking out this lovely volume every Christmas for years to come. Well, I have quite an impressive stack of Christmas jams now. Also, I match my tablecloth, which is kind of awesome. They've had some new flavors this year, which has been so delightful. Lots of really interesting sort of fragrant flavors, which I don't usually like flowers, but None of these have had that kind of soapy taste to me. They've all been really lovely and fruity. Here's apricot lavender. I think I just, oh, if I can grab it from the bottom of the pyramid, I just got plum, pear, star, anise. And I love how the stickers always have the pictures of the fruits and ingredients on the back. Here's peach jasmine flower. There was that blueberry balm. That was one of my favorites. Raspberry rose. Oops. Strawberry linden blossom. I am planning on making some mini Victoria sponges with these jams, or some various cookies, different jam cookie recipes that I have. I have so many flavors to choose from. I usually double up and do multicolored Christmas toast. So I have some mail that I thought I would share with you guys. One book and one calendar item for 2022. I'm a little annoyed because I actually ordered 2 books. One was a gift for my dad. It was an Irving Finkel book. I know I've mentioned him on my channel this year. My dad and I have really enjoyed his lectures on cuneiform. Irving Finkel is a curator at the British Museum and so smart, so funny, so direct. So I bought a book, I think it was called The Cyrus Cylinder by Irving Finkel for my dad, but unfortunately the one that got here in time is Jane Austen at Home by Lucy Worsley, which is for me. I ordered both of these from Blackwell's. I try not to order from Amazon. I used to order from Book Depository all the time, and then I found out that they're owned by Amazon. So these days I've been ordering from Blackwell's, and I do have lots of really fun, fond memories of shopping in Blackwell's in Great Britain and in England. Isn't this so pretty? I love how it's got kind of a foil. I don't know if you guys can see the shiny foil of the cover. Earlier this year, I watched the Lucy Worsley documentary about Jane Austen, and you know, historians and scholars always bring their own take to Jane Austen, and I don't always care for it, but I was surprised by how much I enjoyed her documentary and even learned a few new things. So I'm very excited to dive into her book, but I will not be diving into this quite yet. I actually got this for a very exciting project I have coming up in 2022, which I can't wait to tell you guys all about. Make sure you're subscribed and stay tuned because that announcement will be coming very soon, but yes, I can't wait to pick that up. And then the other mail item that I got here is my Calendar Girl wardrobe for 2022. I still did not manage to snag an actual wooden Calendar Girl. I drew myself this little custom Emma Calendar Girl, which is just you know, a piece of paper. I tried going on the Etsy shop like at the drop times and there was nothing there. I just have bad luck, I guess. But anyway, look at this. Here's a little sneak peek of the wardrobe for 2022. It's all like sort of celestial star signs and very, very ethereal, very elegant. Here, we'll take a quick stroll down 2021 Calendar Girl memory lane. The only problem with this calendar is that I love to save my calendars and like use the art. But the problem is when like the dates and numbers are like mixed into the design, it's not as, you know, timeless. It's not as easy to use, to reuse the designs as art later. I'm gonna have to think of how I could like do a display to feature the old Calendar Girl outfits because aren't they beautiful? Oh, I just want all of these outfits. That was one of my favorites. Super, super cute. Actually, January was the first one, was just one of my absolute favorites. So I'm definitely gonna hold on to these 2021 dresses, but I'm gonna have to decide what to do with them. And I am excited to get out the 2022 dresses. In other calendar woes, I have my Reading Woman engagement calendar out here because I always like to, you know, paste things and make it into kind of a scrapbook. You have all these fun paintings of ladies reading, but they have not come out with a 2022 Reading Woman calendar, engagement calendar. They have like the wall size one and a mini sized one, but they don't have one in like the book edition, and it's very sad. I remember back in, was it 2016, they suddenly stopped making these because prior to that they'd made them for a long time and I got them every year. And then I was so excited in 2020 when they came out with another. 2021 they came out with the engagement calendar, and now it's gone again. What is up with this? What is it, pomegranate? Guys, get yourselves together. I need my engagement calendar. I noticed the National Gallery of Art does have a nice engagement calendar that's like this size and has like lots of space for writing notes and pasting in mementos. And it has a woman with a cat on her shoulder as the cover, so I guess I'll just settle for that for 2022. Well, I've just been finishing up my 12th Shakespeare play of 2021, Henry VI, Part 3. It was a good one to end on, I think, because it's full of action. First this guy's king, then that guy's king. Then he says, well, you can be king when I'm dead. And then he says, no, that's not good enough. I want to be king now. And it's just high drama, all sorts of flip-flopping and changing of sides. I'm really glad that I read the Henry VI, Part 1, 2, and 3, you know, kind of close together. I read 2 of them at the end of November, and then I'm finishing this one up now. Because it's hard to keep track of who's who. And when one Duke of York or Duke of a certain location dies, his son suddenly becomes the Duke. And of course, who's the king keeps switching. The 2 main contenders for the crown, both of their sons are named Edward, which just somehow makes it way more confusing. We had 2 Henry IVs, we had a Henry V, there is a Henry VIII play. You would think that like Henry VI goes straight to Henry VII, but no, that's not the case at all. There's like a big detour through the War of the Roses. I do think I am much more familiar with the British royal line, having read these Shakespeare plays. It was one of my goals to read through the Shakespeare plays that I was not as familiar with, that, you know, I'd never seen performed and had never read before. And so now I think I've read or seen performed just about every Shakespeare play. Titus Andronicus is the one exception, and having looked over the summary, I'm okay skipping that one. I was thinking of doing a separate video wrapping up my 12 Shakespeare plays in 12 months, but I think I'll just kind of put it as a section in my December reading vlog. I read Troilus and Cressida in January. That was really fun. It was set during the Trojan War, which I did not know Shakespeare had dealt with the Trojan War, but it makes perfect sense because he is such a master of language and expression and turns of phrase. But when it comes to like the inventiveness of the plots, I think that Shakespeare pretty much pinched all of his plots from history, from other tales. A cat seems to have joined the forest friends on the table back there. Then I read Henry VIII. I read Pericles. You know, that I felt like was probably my least favorite read of the year. It just felt all over the place. And I remember after reading it thinking, you know, does anyone read this anymore? Does anyone perform it? But I Googled it and like there were lots of performances that are being put on. So even these lesser known Shakespeare plays are still inspiring people. Did you find some toast crumbs back there? Is that what you're doing? Oh my gosh, she's... Ah, there goes the squirrel. He's a nice squirrel, okay, Cymbeline? Yes, I read Richard II, Henry IV, parts 1 and 2. Those were 3 good ones to read in sequence, just the way the Henry VI were good to read in sequence. I read King John, I read Cymbeline, of course, which is how Cymbeline, my kitten, got her name. I also read The Two Noble Kinsmen, which is one that Shakespeare is supposed to have worked on with another playwright of the time, and that one was really good. I would say my favorite was, in fact, Cymbeline, not just because I now have a kitten named Cymbeline, but I think the story was just the most exciting and the most kind of cohesive. These histories are obviously very exciting, and the story is, you know, true to life, more or less. Basically, it's what happened, but it's just, especially this with Henry VI, it's just so all over the place. Power struggles, this person takes control, that person takes control. A very young Henry VII appears, and I love how there's this sort of almost Palpatine-like, not really. I mean, Henry VI wasn't like a Palpatine really at all. In fact, he was the opposite of Palpatine because he was not interested in power and not able to maintain his kingdom. But you know, in episode 1 where he says, "We'll watch your future with great interest," there's this moment where Henry VI meets the young Prince Harry, who's like his nephew or cousin 3 times removed or something like that. And he like has this premonition that like this young man will be a blessing for England. I'm trying to decide if I should next year try to keep up the one Shakespeare month, because next year I would really love to reread. Are you? She's rolling around on top of the chair. I would really like to reread the more popular ones. Like, it's been a while since I reread Macbeth or Othello or Hamlet, or some of the comedies as well. I'd love to freshen up my memory with those. Reading these plays this year has made me notice Shakespeare in other places, in other books that I love, in other movies, and TV shows. He's really just so omnipresent, and it's fun to you know, meet him for yourself. Seeing the plays performed is obviously cool, but just, I don't know, I love reading them and just being, you know, right there immersed with the words. I feel like there was a podcast or an audio interview with P.G. Wodehouse that I listened to earlier this year, where he talked about how he was always reading Shakespeare, which you can totally tell from the Wodehouse books. So now I'm feeling like I should make this a regular part of my reading schedule and make sure that every couple months I'm rereading a Shakespeare play. And think, without Shakespeare, Cymbeline would be named something completely different. And Cymbeline is just such a great name. And now if you'll excuse me, I'd better stop Cymbeline from destroying whatever she's destroying. One of you guys suggested that I do some lights going up my corner bookshelves, because it does kind of have that Christmas tree shape, that Christmas tree look, and I think it just looks so cute. I hope you have all been having a very festive and a very blessed Advent. I'm posting this reading vlog on Christmas Eve, so I hope you have a really wonderful Christmas Eve and a wonderful Christmas. I'm kind of in the midst of all the same books that I've been reading throughout the month, although one book that I did finish, start and finish, was Napoleon of Notting Hill by G.K. Chesterton. My brother Porthos had recommended this to me, and I thought I'd pick it up and give it a try before the end of the year. It was on my Kindle. I got it for free, but my Kindle's out of battery. So I was going to share with you all the quotes that I highlighted. I wasn't sure how fast I would get through this at first. The first kind of couple chapters, it felt a little wandering. I wasn't really sure where the story was going to go. It's set in a sort of apocalyptic dystopian future, but it's sort of an Ayn Rand world where everything is a little gray, like globalization is taking over, and like bigger countries have just swallowed up smaller countries, and nobody really believes in anything anymore. It's just all very depressing. But there's one character, Quinn Oberon, who one day just kind of stops acting as he's expected. I liked this description of how one day he was, instead of walking with his companions, he ended up a couple steps behind them, and he noticed that their frock coats looked like two dragons. And it was just a very evocative, cool description. At first, the story felt a little bit more like The Man Who Was Thursday, which I've read and did enjoy. When I read it, I felt like it was a little bit hard to follow at times. However, eventually, we do get a crystallized plot, and a very exciting plot at that. I don't want to give too much away, and I can't read my quotations out, which makes me really annoyed, but I ended up finishing it really quickly. It is fairly short. In some ways, it reminded me of The Poet and the Lunatics, which I absolutely love. I really need to reread that. I just thought that was such an amazing book, so many really deep reflections, but like tied into really interesting mysteries, kind of like the Father Brown mysteries. And it had great insights and like thought-provoking passages, but it wasn't quite as abstract as The Man Who Was Thursday. I do think I would still rank The Poet and the Lunatics higher than Napoleon of Notting Hill, but I would certainly rank Napoleon of Notting Hill very high up there. Very thought-provoking, very interesting to see the boroughs of London kind of waking up and finding something to care about again. I'm just gonna see if the internet can find me some of the quotations that I highlighted. There is a law written in the darkest of the books of life, and it is this: if you look at a thing 999 times, you are perfectly safe. If you look at it the 1000th time, you are in frightful danger of seeing it for the first time. I think that's right before he sees the dragons, which is pretty great. Many clever men like you have trusted to civilization. Many clever Babylonians, many clever Egyptians, many clever men at the end of Rome. Can you tell me, in a world that is flagrant with the failures of civilization, what there is particularly immortal about yours? Yeah, this is definitely a reflection on civilization and when civilization goes too far. Adventures happen on dull days and not on sunny ones. When the cord of monotony is stretched most tight, then it breaks with a sound like song. Don't you believe people when they tell you that people sought for a sign and believed in miracles because they were ignorant. They did it because they were wise, filthily, vilely wise, too wise to eat or sleep or put on their boots with patience. Anyway, Porthos's recommendation was excellent, spot on. I really enjoyed Napoleon of Notting Hill. Porthos did suggest another G.K. Chesterton, The Ball and Cross. He said that was somewhat similar, so I'm thinking I'll have to give that a try next. It's funny, I don't really like Chesterton's nonfiction. When I've tried it, I've felt it was very dry and just, I didn't get on with it. And the Father Brown mysteries I do like, but I don't love them. And same with The Man Who Was Thursday. But I feel like these other random G.K. Chestertons that like you don't really hear people talk about, like The Poet and the Lunatics, I think I found randomly at the library. I'd love to get a physical copy of that actually, because it's one of those books I love and I feel like I should have a copy of. And Napoleon of Notting Hill, I would never have heard of if not for Porthos. It's always fun to discover those lesser known works of well-known authors. Just as I got a lot of good reading done over Thanksgiving, I'm hoping I'm gonna get a lot of good reading done over Christmas, but I'll have to fill you in on that in January or at a later date. I am planning to do my top reads of 2021. Would you like to say Merry Christmas to everybody, Cymbeline? Say have a very Merry Christmas. We'll see you next year.